I tend to think that when people say I'm not a good business person, is that they somehow think that it's okay to spend 20 years becoming a good artist from nothing, but you're somehow supposed to be a good business person on day one.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
That's
why
true.
why would that be true?
Yeah.
Why
Yeah.
wouldn't it take 20 years or 30 years of agonizing and trial and error to become a good business person?
Yeah, that's
And
true.
the fact is it does. So this absurd concept of saying, I'm not a good business person, it's like me saying, oh, I'm not a good artist.
Yeah.
It's like a baby saying, oh, gets up, stands to walk, and falls over, says, oh, I'm not a good walker. I'm never going to be able to walk. I'm never going to try again.
You just hit the nail on the head.
Right?
Hi, I'm Jon Foster-Pedley, the Dean of Henley Business School, Africa. For 80 years, we've been building people who build businesses, and here, in turn, build Africa. At Henley, we're not just a business school, we're a global learning movement with a heart in Africa, impacting lives through education.
You've got such a great story, and I mean, you're the Dean and the Director of the Henley Business School.
Yeah, in Africa. There is another dean in the UK who runs the world, including me.
Oh, I see. Okay.
So, yeah.
Oh, okay. But I love that slogan behind you.
Yeah, it's what we came up with in the end. After we didn't start with that, when we started to describe what was driving us and what we did, that best described it. Yeah, yeah.
Because you, it seems of what I read of you, you're very interested in the person, in the people.
Yeah, I think I'd like to think that educators are interested in people, not just in things. I mean, that's not entirely true, I suppose, but it depends on the sort of education we do. It's very much about, how are people and how do we grow people? How do people develop their capability? That's what education is about. And that is not just for the sake of, their minds and their lives, but our collective lives as well, in society and in nations or whatever you're trying to build. You make a choice of what you teach people, and normally it is for some end. And often it's a very short-term end to get a job or to get a career or to build a company. But companies sit in a system trying to build, value in society and create. Whether that's right or wrong is another whole story about the damage we're doing to our earth and perhaps ourselves, and being focused overly on work and phones and all these things that are addictive.
We are hopeful, we're optimistic, and we have purpose. We don't just educate, we build prosperity. We empower you to believe in yourself and support you to achieve great things. So join us.
And it's not everybody seems to be able to find their way, find the thing that's really their, that their happy place, or their, where they find fulfillment in life.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how easy it is to do that, and whether we are chasing the right or wrong things. We tend to chase happiness for its own sake, and if we're not happy, we fail. But I mean, there are many, many, many deep schools of thought and practice, and billions of people who've been thinking and living through that whole existence of life, and what is a good life, what is a bad life. Philosophers have written about that. So I think to try and find your happy place is an interesting idea, isn't it? If you chase happiness itself, is happiness like to come, or is happiness an emergent property of circumstances you put yourself or adjust to? Is it the way you adjust to circumstances? This is one of these. I'm visualizing the massive warehouses full of self-help books trying to answer that question,
Yeah.
and the religions and the politics and
Mm,
businesses, everything.
mm.
What is
But
our happy place? Ikigai, the Japanese would say, isn't it?
yeah, but you followed a lot of paths before you came where you are now. And originally you are from Britain.
Yes, so I was born to a British family. My father was in Royal Air Force. My mother was really a very smart person, but worked to look after us as kids, really, and helped my father's career as well. And she wanted to be a vet, I remember, my mother, but at that time, before the Second World War, I don't think there was money available for her to do that at that particular time. And also, there weren't that many women vets at the time, I suppose, and it wasn't that easy for her to do it. So it's a pity she didn't follow that career, because she would have been extremely good at it. But she ended up going to a sort of finishing school in Switzerland and doing all the things that people did, and met my father, and then she had a family, and she was a very strong influence in our lives. So yeah, it was an Air Force family.
Oh, your sound went off.
It was an Air Force family,
Yeah.
and I was born on an Air Force station in the UK just after the Second World War, but it was still very much, a memory of those times for everybody. There was ration difficulty, there was Korean War was going on, so it was a volatile time for people. Cold War was starting to emerge, and so it was a challenging time. I went to Malaya, as it was called then, when my father was posted there looking after air operations, and we went there as a family. So I was brought up in Malaya. I'm one of three kids. I have an older brother,
Oh, okay.
3 years older than me, and a younger brother, 6 years younger than me. And we were brought up in Malaya, and then came back to England when I was about 7. And which was lovely. And then my father left the Air Force, and I went to private schools in England, in Surrey. And I was brought in a very typical prep school system, as they called it then. And then I went to a minor public school and a better public school. So I was very much of that sort of middle class upbringing, and very, we were Church of England, not very religious. We went to church on Christmas and Easter, but we had a lot of very strong values, and we didn't know very much about business, and we were very much that sort of country military perspective on life, service to the servants to the cause, I suppose, and to the nation, very much embedded into how we were brought up.
But your years that you were outside of the UK and not in that sort of that bubble, do you think that changed also the way you sort of looked at life then?
Very much so. I think, being brought up in that sort of, in that time in private education, it was we learned classics, we learned French, we were outdoors, we played a lot of sports. It was fairly tough, I suppose people would think it now, but nothing like my father's generation had it. Going to boarding school since the age of 8 was tricky, but we lived out in the country, and so we basically lived outside and went fishing and walking and in the woods, doing everything that kids do, that we were very lucky to be able to do. And then when I was about 15, I got a scholarship, 16, scholarship to the Royal Air Force College, Cranmore, as a Air Force officer, which I went to when I was about 18. And so
was that the dream then? I mean, did you want to go to?
I didn't really have a dream at that time. I was just very interested in life, and my father suggested I do it, and I did it. It was very much in the family tradition. And I think it was curious. It was interesting. It was challenging. Go to a very tough military academy as an officer cadet, and so I went there and thoroughly enjoyed it, and found out I was quite good at flying. I started flying when I was 16 in gliders, and then 17 in powered aircraft. And then they wanted people to get degrees, and I think the military academies at that time were switching from 2.5 years military academy course into a course to people taking a degree. And so my father, without really checking in with me very much, got me to studying sociology in central London as an Air Force officer, without really understanding what he was dropping me into, because a friend of mine was at the same place of study. And so I went from this really quite rugged military academy life, flying and running and doing survival exercises and marching around and learning all about leadership and whatever, which really was quite, I enjoyed, mostly hard, to sitting in the middle of this sort of free-thinking London in the Vietnam War protest era, with all the hippies, long hair and everything else that was going on. And with me, with an Air Force officer with my hair up to here, flying weekend a month, and now arguing about pacifism and all this sort of stuff. So after a while, I'd realized that I hadn't had a very deep exposure to life, and I decided I wanted to buy myself out of the Air Force, much to my father's huge regret, because I couldn't have had a better start in life. But I also realized I'd had an upbringing that I think had limits. And life was exciting. Maybe I could go to India and see what was going on. Maybe I could be a writer or all these sort of things. So the free-thinking bug got me, and I bought my way out. And then I ended up very, very much adrift and realized I didn't have very many life skills. And my family, well, my elder brother was flying with the Royal Air Force. My younger brother was at school. And I decided I needed to pursue the free-thinking, exploration of consciousness agenda, and was very fascinated by what was going on in this sort of social challenge and breakdown. It was an exciting time in a sense, but also I think it was calling to me because there was something in me that really wanted to know more and be more, and hadn't been explored either emotionally or in my thinking. I was very attracted to the ideas and to the intellect and to the complexity of thinking, to the possibilities of life that I hadn't really been exposed to. And
but you grew up in this structured world, really. If you think of boarding school and you think of your dad's job and growing up in a military environment. So it is interesting that you yourself, that you didn't feel that you needed this structure.
Well, I think I was brought up with an awful lot of structure, and I think I benefited a huge amount out of it. The structure isn't always repressive. Structure sometimes is incredibly developmental, especially when it's building character and discipline. It's things we all need in life. But it has a downside to it, and so and I think the downside can stifle the upside of freedom and intellect and curiosity and creativity, which I was more drawn to without really realizing it. I'm not rejecting the structure or what I learned. I think it was incredibly helpful to me, actually. I mean, it's easy to go down that sort of trope. I was brought up in this very structured environment. I rebelled against it. I don't think life is that. I don't think it's that at all. I think we benefit from everything. So, I did. And then I had a few years doing multiple different sorts of jobs. I thought I'd wanted to go to India and see what's going on. I spent some time in that sort of Hindu ashram in Europe, and did manual laboring jobs and gardening and driving and civil servants and all sorts of many things for a few years. What I was doing was I was discovering life in a different way, meeting people across class and cultural divides, meeting creatives and poets and musicians and architects and criminals and people who would like to be saints and people who would like to be business people, just really exploring that world for a while. I've no idea fully why I did it or why I was drawn to it so much. I think it was partly the times it was available then. It was a really interesting time. A lot was breaking down, but then after a while, that was done. It was time to do something else. And I decided, I was quite good at selling things and I was quite good at flying. So why don't I sell aeroplanes? And so I got a job selling used airplanes in Channel Islands. A very kind guy gave me a job. And then I decided, well, actually, maybe I shouldn't have thrown away my flying career. And I thought, well, I'll become a pilot. And so I borrowed money and worked my way through for a number of years doing all sorts of things, becoming a flying instructor in Channel Islands until I had enough hours to become a commercial pilot. And I
So
borrowed
where
money.
was that? Where did you do that?
That was in the Channel Islands in Britain.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, Jersey. And then when I'd got my qualifications and I had a huge debt behind me, I found I could get some commercial flying jobs. So I became a pilot in Scotland in the very bad weather, flying charter, and loved it. And then I decided I wanted to travel overseas. And in my sort of alternative years, I met quite a lot of South Africans at one stage or not. And I wrote around the world for jobs as a commercial pilot, and I got a couple of offers in South Africa. And because I enjoyed aerobatics, and one of those people was the aerobatic champion of South Africa, I said, I'll go and work for him. Maybe I'll get to fly his airplanes. And then I ended up in South Africa, instructing, flying charter, flying in the bush, doing the geophysical survey, and eventually became an airline pilot, an airline captain for a small airline.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah.
Wow.
Having paid back.
I must say, Jon, when you're talking and telling the story, it sounds all so easy, but it must have been quite challenging to do all this.
Yeah, I borrowed this money, and my parents had gone overseas. My mum was ill, and I was the sort of son who'd gone off the family way, as it were. But I think my father found that hard, but came around in the end. I think I found it hard. It was a difficult exploratory time. I was, struggling to understand life and what it was, but I was working hard all the time, different things. And eventually decided that my sort of wandering years, exploratory years, alternative years, if you like, were over. And I'd learnt enough, and I'd exposed myself to so much more of life that, well, I better get myself together, really. And towards the end of my 20s, I did all this, and it took me many years to borrow that money because I'd hitchhiked around, and I'd lived in sort of circumstances that were, more communal sometimes. I was and I'd come from a military background. I wasn't very spoiled in that respect. I could put up with quite a lot of things. I borrowed all the money and lived very frugally indeed for many, many years till I paid it all off. But it was an adventure. It was exciting. And I think the fact that I chose that and made it and borrowed the money and paid it all by myself, stuck to my commitments and built a whole life for me, having had a privileged start, which I foolishly are not thrown away, I reconstructed it and built it on my own. I think that was a very important part of me, knowing I could do that and seeing the achievement I built. Took a lot of effort. Yeah, it did. And a lot of heartache. Certainly did. Wasn't easy.
But you, this whole time where you said you had to borrow the money and to start flying again and did all that, so still you felt that there was something else, that this was not what that you wanted to do.
I don't really think of doing what I want to do as being the ultimate aim in life. I mean, having purpose and meaning and being conscious and understanding who you are is more important to doing the job you want to do, understanding that there's doing things, becoming more you, doing things that ask more of you, that have more impact and more value. I was never enough driven by money. I probably should have been more. And I have a very clear view about money. It's incredibly important. You should be very good at using money, and you should be very good at using lots and lots of money if you're using it in a cause, because many people have lots of money and they use it very badly or criminally. So to make things better in life, money is a means to an end to improve things. You should be very good at using money for good causes and allocating it for the proper investments that help people prosper and thrive and make the planet look good and have decent values in life. You should be using it for that, not for bad reasons. Money is just a neutral thing, maybe, and you have to learn how to use it appropriately. So it's very important that you learn how to use it, and you have the values to use that money appropriately. But I think it's very dangerous to be dogmatic about things or to think that ever you've got the best answer to things. You can only try and be collective about that. I don't know if this makes any sense at all to you, but anyway.
No, it does, really. It does. And you then also I read somewhere that when you got to study business, that you really felt connected there.
Yeah, after I'd my mum was sick, and I came back after I was flying in South Africa to join British Aerospace, selling airliners in Africa and the Middle East while I was flying
Really?
part-time. So I then became an aerobatic competition pilot part-time, which I enjoyed, and I did a lot of air experience and flying instruction around the place. But I wasn't flying commercially in the same way as I had done for a while in South Africa, which I thoroughly enjoyed, by the way.
Mhm.
And so I did that job going around Africa. It was a very interesting job and a very eye-opening one as well, because, you know, the world of very expensive aerospace sales is one that's been written about a lot. There's lots of engineering excellence, there's lots of commercial excellence, but also there's lots of commercial poor practices and things. And I could see that was probably around, and I became slightly unhappy about the way, perhaps whether I'm right or wrong in perceiving it that way, that sometimes sales were carried out multinationally. It wasn't always the most ethical way, I think, and I became to see that there was a potential for that sort of thing happening, and didn't want to be part of that. And so eventually I decided I wanted to do an MBA. I'd actually dropped out of my first degree in that time after I left the Air
Really?
Force. I dropped out of it and worked very hard to get all my commercial flying qualifications, and did other studies later. And then I did an MBA. Luckily, the company paid for me to a very good, very expensive MBA in Europe, and they kind enough to pay for me, give me a full salary and pay all those costs while I was doing it. So I was extremely lucky. And that was British Aerospace did that for me. And then I decided to get a job as an organizational development consultant within British Aerospace, because I'd become so interested. So when I was studying an MBA, it wasn't the business so much that intrigued me, but just the capacity of one's mind and the interest of the balance between being innovative and imaginative and organized, because businesses are the balance between being organized and being inventive. And sometimes for good purposes, sometimes for bad. And one has to make that choice. And then I worked with a group of psychologists for a while, which I found fascinating. And I was just continually learning. I think I've always just gone where there's more learning, because I was really intrigued by that. And then I had an opportunity to go to France to be part of a joint venture with Airbus and Aerospatiale and other big aerospace companies as the marketing director for a new startup in Toulouse to set up a college to build the commercial capability of the European aerospace industry.
Wow.
And I'd started teaching before I went there after my MBA at a college in the UK, where I bumped into a South African called Ralph Stacey, who gave me a job doing teaching part-time in his undergrad and a little bit in his MBA. It turned out that he was one of the world's leading complexity theorists in management. And he and I got on really well. And I became very intrigued by ideas of complexity theory and strategy. And I started teaching strategy part-time while I was in France at a European university. And I became very interested in building on the things I'd learned on strategy and thinking. And business itself was intriguing, but how people use themselves and how you think to do very large ideas, to get things to work, to make large ventures or large innovations or large change happen in the world. But business, well, we see it as reductive into profit-making enterprise at a corporate. Everybody who's providing something for some form of exchange of value is in business. So artists are in business. Mm-hmm. Yeah, everybody, that's how I see business. And we tend to make business as this word, which is this evil world to do with corporate profiteering. Mm. Can be that, but that's a very, very narrow view of what I think business means.
Exactly. Yeah, I actually, I also I always thought of it that way, but I've been speaking to somebody who's doing investments for her company, and she told me about her job, and I thought to myself, you must be very creative and very forward-thinking to be able to figure that all out, and that in a day's work that she does that. And then it suddenly dawned on me that, then I started being more aware of marketing strategies and things like that, how that is really very creative and for me, a very artistic mind that's able to do that.
Well, yeah, and it's fascinating, isn't it? The life with all its endeavors within it. And I think that's what happened in my alternative years, is that I was able to get out of one channel of thinking and to be exposed to a bewildering variety of life, which I enjoyed. It was difficult sometimes and distracting, sometimes alienating, and felt a sense of ennui, and other times I felt a sense of passion and interest. And you were just exposed to so much more about what life could be, because we talk very narrowly about life. We don't talk about our love life and our families and our artistic life and the challenges and our mental wellness. We often don't even start to our spiritual interests or searching what to do. We live in this incredible capability we have, and business is narrowed down into one little box if we don't watch out. But all of life is within business, and really in one form or another. And there are many, many forms of what we might call business. There's
exactly
green business and trade business and counter trade and barter and simple exchanges. We've very narrowed down the view of what we call business, and all of human capabilities are absorbed in that, as they are within an artist or within a musician or politician, probably.
But and many, it's for me also something that I want to talk to you about is that many artists that I speak to, the moment I ask them, "Are you a good businessman?" Because you sort of think, okay, so an artist has to live from what they are doing, and then almost everybody says to me, "No, I'm not a good businessman. When it comes to money, I'm sort of not good at it." And I was always wondering, why is it? Because I think business and art is so interlinked. Yet you find business people who think they are not artistic or think they are not artists, and then you find artists who think they are not businessmen or businesswomen.
So I suppose artists are people who are not art critics or not art philosophers or art educators necessarily or art analysts. They're artists who are creating objects of, I would imagine, the new forms of expression or understanding that help people understand how we feel or how we see the world in different ways, or change the way we see the world, or express the world, or what they see visually in different ways. I remember I went through the Van Gogh Museum recently, tracking his life and how his artistic expression, the way he faced the world, and how that was linked with his probable mental illnesses and various drug and alcohol and other uses and illnesses, physical illnesses he would have dealt with, and his exploration into Japanese and to Impressionism and all sorts of different forms of art. That was, as an untrained artist, it was fascinating to see how he explored that, what drove him. We love to think that probably there's some great rationality. What drove him a lot of the time was he and his brother trying to sell something, and him being incredibly, really unhappy. He never sold anything, and he wouldn't produce marketable stuff because he would do the very basic, primitive peasant art because they were expressing something that mattered to him. And I think the true artist is always very true to what they see, that it's what they want to show the world or what's in them. They see this and it means something, and they want people to see that. And not everyone resonates with them. They may be before or after their time, or, so a lot of what was interesting in his career, what was saleable art was very much in a genre and very defined by the patrons of art at the time. And none of the patrons would buy what he did. But now, as he was about to die, he started, people started getting interested in him, and now he's a legendary artist. So it's very difficult to understand. And his brother was the so-called businessman, but obviously patron, actually. I don't think he managed to sell much of his stuff, anyone. So what is a businessman, woman? What is an artiste, or however you like to call it, it's very difficult to express. I think we see business people as people who come up with an idea, like an entrepreneur. I've got an idea. I'm going to sell it to people. I'm going to make a profit. I'm going to become wealthy. I'm going to build an enterprise. I'm going to have security and stability, and people are going to like what I do. It's going to give me a certain status, but also I'm going to invent things. Now, within that genre of business, you've got the analysts, like the art analysts, the business schools, the philosophers, and the academics. You've got the pure business people, the poor experience, the entrepreneurs, the people who go out there. You've got the people within the corporate who are working now on a major scale, which and taking a small business to a major scale is huge endeavor. The amount of complexity that starts being involved when you're not building in your garage, but now you're building in a small factory. Now you're building a several national factory. Now you're building maybe in multiple multinational factories. Now you're not just building things, you're creating services like advertising, or you're an art investor. You build a galaxy of magazines about art or fashion, and there's a fashion in this business. There are multiple ways in which you call business. It's all predicated, I suppose, on you look at people and say, well, what do people want? What do people need? You provide what people want better than other people are doing it, then money will come your way, which if you're clever, you won't fritter away. You'll reinvest back into the things that made you wealthy or made you popular. Or you discover undiscovered needs or latent feelings or whatever people have, and you try and then why does fashion work? What is the business of fashion? What's that about? It's certainly not about productivity. It's for you, as Coco Chanel says, I think in French, la mode est ce qui se démode. Fashion is that which you make out of fashion. You kill fashion. So fashion kills itself annually and creates annual cycles. And that's one of the things about the fashion business is you destroy it. So now you've got a whole range of new things coming up. What's capture? Why are people giving you money for that? Well, you've created some form of value for them. It's fascination, it's beauty, it's how they feel, it's elegance, it's some sort of aesthetic. So business is always principally about finding somebody wants and then producing it to them in a way that they can access, finding out, doing it in a way that's different from other people, because if you did it same as other people, why would they come to you? You either describe it differently, you market it differently, or it's better functioning, whatever it is, until you find that niche that people start saying, yeah, I want this. And then when you've got some competitive advantage because you're doing it differently, people give you money for that because, I must buy your stuff. But, why must I buy your stuff? Great, there's some money for your work. And they keep giving it to you, you keep doing better and better, and then you invest that money to make a better production, to give yourself more time to go and get inspired, to get more helpers around you, or to build a better factory, get better accountants, better whatever. So you invested in so you can do that thing better. And then as you grow, probably people get bored, you've got to be able to innovate. And so now you think, where does innovation come from? Well, it doesn't come from the same thing that doing a spreadsheet does necessarily. It comes from an imagination, being able to visualize the world, empathize and intuit what's going on. So now you've got all those characteristics within business as well. And they're not all these smoke-filled rooms or whatever, all these bankers sitting around the table. The bankers have their own world. They can be creative too, not always in good ways.
Yeah.
So I think what I'm saying is business is a cycle of trying to find needs, supply them in different ways. People like that, get the money for that, reinvest the money in ways to keep that differentiation going. That's the special thing. And make sure you continue to provide value. And so unfortunately, some people do that in ways that are not good for other people, like get us addicted to cell phones or cocaine or whatever. And some people do it in ways that probably are good for people, like producing wellness or helping people live more prosperous lives, or producing education that helps them, helps save the world. I don't know what.
Yeah.
So it's complicated. It's complicated.
Yeah. But it's you said the word really, value, and that is something that I also think a lot about. Is what makes us value. That's what makes it. That's what do you have to do for people to value what you have to offer. So if it's an entrepreneur that has a product or something, immediately, he thinks of the value of it and he asks the value of it, and we are willing to pay the value of it. But then you get somebody who spends their whole life, say, being or developing an art form, yet the value, we as a society can't always see the value of it.
I wonder why that is, isn't it? I mean, I've been involved in programs of business acumen for artists. And so we quite often talk about, well, how do you produce business acumen for artists? And there was one particular person I know who was a manager of some pop groups. And he was a very good manager of pop groups, very well-known people and individual people. His name was Simon Napier Bell, and he managed George Michael, took him to China for the first time from Wham.
Oh, okay.
He wrote a number of books, sort of Black Vinyl and White Powder was one of them, talking about all this sort of interesting background to the pop industry. But one of the things I remember him saying was that he was a songwriter at one time, and a good songwriter. But interestingly, when he started writing books, his songwriting talent seemed to disappear.
Oh.
And I never quite worked out why. And I wondered if perhaps it was because that when you're in the songwriting genre, you're not being precise necessarily. You're capturing feelings and impressions. You're capturing ideas, or you're writing things that people kind of relate to with the music in that form, in that art form, whereas writing books is a very different thing. And what will worry me a bit is that having been able to express that much more figurative, creative songwriting, that when he's writing books, maybe he lost some of that ability. Another part of his brain slipped in place, where he became much more producing of books and being a lot more rational and analytic.
Oh, yeah.
Which was interesting to me that in him, if I'm quoting him right, and if he hears this, he'll probably say I'm not. If I'm quoting him right, that he seemed to lose one to gain the other. And that goes into this idea that creativity does need its own pure creativity, if you like, does need its own sort of bubble to exist in, because it's a fairly obsessive focus of thinking of the new and being imaginative. Presumably, you've got other people who are very, very driven to just do the job and do what's told of them, who probably suffer a loss of creativity, and maybe the super creatives suffer a loss of another form of balance, if you like.
Oh, yeah.
So maybe businesses are about trying to find that harmonious balance between the innovation, creativity, and the ability to produce and make things work and get out to people who need them. And maybe artists who are not recognized as such are not seen by many people, for a start, or that it's hard for people to interpret what they're saying. Maybe there's a great idea. There are many books written, not all that many land, and very, very few successful. And so it must be the same with artists. I don't know the answer to why that's the case. I suspect it's because people haven't applied their minds to every aspect of it, of what they're doing in art. What do you think?
No, but I wonder if it's this thing where we say we sort of put business into a category where we say, immediately there's somebody who can be good in business, but not everybody can. Yet business is actually, it's a creative thing. It's a negotiation thing. It's we all do business in a way. We do business, all of us, on a very small scale. But that we put this in a category to make it a bit distant, And then we ask also how business people, because I spoke to somebody who suggested that in business colleges, people are taught a form of art to make them also aware of different mind, the different ways the mind thinks, or creative thinking, or thinking in different ways. And then people also suggest that artists in their studies do business courses so that they can also be prepared when they leave, and go into the real world to be able to do business.
Well, we did a course called Creatorgy. I created a course called Creatorgy. How can you, and I think it was a bit of a fantasy, but is it possible to predictably and strategically produce creativity?
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So it's kind of how do you proceduralize the unprocedurable, which is great, obvious, complete paradox in that, contradiction, perhaps. But I was curious whether it really was a contradiction. I think, I imagine artists spend an awful long time becoming good artists, right? They must spend years and years and years of thought and care and practice, failure, trial and error, agony and ecstasy, whatever, to become a good artist. And I imagine a lot of good artists who are never recognized as good artists. And I imagine a lot of recognized artists who might not, by some standard, be recognized as very good artists, even though they're recognized. And it seems to me that we would understand that artists would take half a lifetime or whatever to become really good at all. Depends on what sort of art, maybe in their early 20s, so flash of inspiration and the style they have, some latent capability. And I'm sure you've got some few artists who are just brilliant geniuses who just produce art. But in every bit of art that I've studied, and it's very limited compared with somebody who's a real art student or you, most people would find artists, they go through stages, and like Picasso did and others, they go through different times, and it depends who they're influenced by and who they're copying. And it's a process, same as musicians. You watch the flow of bands, and they would take many, many years to get good at it. I tend to think that when people say, I'm not a good business person, is that they somehow think that it's okay to spend 20 years becoming a good artist from nothing, but you're somehow supposed to be a good business person on day one.
Oh, yeah.
Well,
that's true.
Why would that be true?
Yeah.
Why wouldn't it take 20 years or 30 years of agonizing and trial and error to become a good business person?
Yeah, that's
true. And the fact is, it does. So this absurd concept of saying, I'm not a good business person, it's like me saying, I'm not a good artist. Yeah. It's like a baby saying, gets up, stands to walk, and falls over, says, I'm not a good walker. I'm never going to be able to walk. I'm never going to try again.
You just hit the nail on the head.
Right? So, of course, you have to learn these things. So if you want to learn to be good at business, you've got to trial and error. Good business, some people are brilliant at it, or brought up in families who are very good at it, and they learn all the sort of senses at the dinner table and with their friends or at the schools. Get it? Other people, sometimes very neurodiverse people who go into classic education, don't fit into that, become very creative because they've been trying to fit into a way of being that is trying to produce a standardized thing. I don't know many Montessori, perhaps, many schools that really trying to take children so that they can be artists or musicians from the age of 5. And if they are going to be artists and musicians, there's often a kind of this awful dark mill of abuse of trying to get them to be a ballet dancers. Nobody's saying, no, I'm not going to make you a business person, or you're going to be an artist. And they'd probably end up by the time they're 20 being naturally very good artists because they've been brought up with it. So I think people who want to say, I'm not good at business, just, catch a wake up. Why would you be? How much time do you spend studying it? And are you interested? Yeah, I need to live. Well, yeah, it's hard to learn to live if you want to learn to do it. I knew a very good artist in South Africa called Paul Du Toit, who was a sculptor and a cartoonist. Well, I say interesting. He became very successful. And I used to get him to come and talk on my strategy classes. And he said, I became successful because I worked out how the business of art worked. I realized there were these curators around the world. I realized there were all these people who are influential in the art world. I spent a lot of time talking to them over 10 years. I would get to know them. I would understand what they want. I would make relationships with them. I would continually talk to them, and I would find what they want. I would share them a bit of my art. They would give me feedback or not. And eventually I had this network of curators around the world, and I was in Africa doing something original. We had a rather naive form of art, which are these sort of naive faces and statues, which are lovely and very similar in a sense in his evolution. And one thing he did, which he expressed extremely well. And he became a very successful artist and earned a lot of money because he'd learned the art of business. He became a successful artist and a known artist. I think some artists might have said, oh, no, I'm better than Paul or whatever. And some business people might have said, oh, no, I'm a better business person than Paul. But somehow he put together this art world and whatever. So I think a lot of artists rely on the specialists who become their sponsors and the galleries that help them, and what little I understand of it. But Paul managed to put it together and was a great example of somebody who'd applied his mind both to, he was prolific, but he was also very good at engaging with people. And he had a personality to match, which he built. He developed his personality to do that. I don't know.
Yeah, but it makes...
You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, because now that you're talking about this, I thought about friends of ours who had their son was, I think he was 8 or 9 years old, and he started taking his pocket money, buying vegetables, and then at the supermarket, and then put it in little packages and sold them at the bus stop. First, he started selling out of their garage, and then his parents discovered he was doing it, and it was then moved on. He moved on as a small little entrepreneur, and I think of it now, and he's now having his own business and everything. But it started there, so he really, where somebody else might have practiced the violin, he practiced the art of selling, and from the garage.
And a lot more than selling, of producing something that people wanted, getting feedback, changing its pricing, understanding what people liked, didn't like, asking them, getting it to them in the right place at the right time, taking their money, using the money well to build up what he was doing in different ways. So he saw this whole cycle of what business is. Understand, produce, sell, learn. You need a sort of upward spiral in business of learning. And the other thing, a very famous strategist called Michael Porter, a Harvard professor, said there are only two things that matter in business or strategy. One is productivity, the other is innovation.
Okay. Mm-hmm.
And if you fry people's imaginations through the education system, hopefully that doesn't happen. And if you're not stimulating them to be imaginative, and they must just be predictable because and serious, whatever, then how are they going to be good at imagination suddenly when they're 40, when they get promoted into senior management and they're asked to innovate? Why would they be good at that? Probably not, but they might be very good at taking a current venture and making it bigger and understanding how to scale it up to get the departments and the capabilities and understanding how to grow it into different parts of the world and understanding different law regimes and understanding how to pay people and how to manage people and how human resources works and how to manage a board and understanding how governance works. There's a whole range of different things one needs to learn if one's going to be good at that. Yeah. Unless you are people like Richard Branson, who is a but a self-revealed dyslexic, saying what trouble that had with him during his life and many times during business. But what he was incredibly inspirational and capable of was he saw an idea and he did it. And how come he saw that idea and other people didn't? It might be partly because he rejected a whole load of conditioning subliminally, as it were, always conditioning, if you call it that, his neurodiversity, much better way of calling it, around his dyslexia allowed him actually other powers, which is to see things through fresh eyes. You've got to think from first principles in business when you see an opportunity. You can take what you knew before and apply it onto it. But what if it's a brand new idea and all this learning doesn't quite match? And you can see a whole new possibility. That's imagination. You might say that in a way that business person has some of the same capabilities an artist or musician might have.
Exactly.
I don't know. I really don't know.
Because
I'm just musing. I don't know the answers at all.
No, but I think I did a project here in Vienna where I photographed 500 artists in their windows, and I also spoke to many of them. And actually, through this project, and this is what made me then continue with this program, I realized the skills that you develop by learning an art form. You know that, and I've been now also realizing more and more that these skill sets actually apply to business people as well. People in business, you know, they have the same type of skill sets. And I was now, when you were talking about your story and how you the things that you did, it really tells me also that there's some sort of you have to be brave in a way. You know, you have to have a little bit of guts to do what you've done. And I think it's also the same thing. You have to have the guts to also start a business or be in business.
I don't think bravery is something we should applaud as being exceptional. Oh, you're a brave person.
No, I mean brave as in not,
yeah,
you know what I mean, but like sort of the courage to, hey, I'm going to do it, or I'm going to borrow the money and I'm going to get it done.
I'm with you. Yeah. I'm with you. I'm not. I totally get you. But what I'm trying to say is that I think we suddenly think, oh, that's a brave person, and that's some strange, unnatural characteristic of we should praise this brave. Wonderful. That's something separate from us. No. We are naturally endowed with courage. You are courageous in many ways that I'm sure you must be in what you've done. So courage is something we have, and courage is something we should normalize, not make exceptional. So being courageous is part of who we are as people, and courage is fundamentally doing things when you're scared about them and when you're uncertain, and uncertainty makes us scared. And being brave is going against your screaming mind and saying risk, danger. And thank goodness your mind does do that, because, you know, being brave is going against all sorts of social norms or people's expectations, things that you feel you were excluded or stigmatized, or there's some form of loss involved. And we don't want to be running out in front of the road or doing crazy things in front of people and alienating people for no good reason. Why would you do that? But being brave is also entirely who we are. And being brave is something we should just understand is not some magic superhuman capability you should praise people for. We should always be being brave. We should normalize it. Being brave is normal what you do. If you weren't brave at some point, you would never do things. Just say, this feels a bit fearful, I'm going to have a go. That's being brave. That's a good thing. Showing a bit of courage. Courage is a human attribute, as is fear, as is weakness, as is cowardice. You know, we all have these things. You know, you sometimes cowardice will save your life.
Yeah.
Or you might label it, or was it prudence, or was it cowardice? I don't know. It depends who's looking at it. So I think you do have to be brave, and I think also understand that if you are going to be brave and do things that have risk, you will inevitably suffer sometimes by not understanding what you were doing, and you will have consequences that are painful, very painful. So the other part of progress is also the ability to handle pain in your life, whether it's loneliness or exclusion or financial pain or this or that. I mean, none of us want to be there. You don't want to mess your body up if you can avoid it, and keep your health. But, you know, courage and pain and suffering, these are all part of what makes life go on. We live this myth, as it were, that somehow you're a business person, you're right, you're doing it. You're basically always on the edge of uncertainty. I knew somebody who was the chairman of the Confederation of British Industry. He was knighted for being a brilliant businessman. He was also an outstanding concert pianist. Sir Trevor Halls. He played the Albert Hall with Elton John once, I believe. And so not only that, but he was a master of business and one of the leading business people in Britain at the time. And by some circumstance, I got to know him. I got to know his son. And I asked him one time, I said, what does it feel like to be at your position when you're at the top of business? And I went to his flat, and his flat was, there was Rupert Murdoch, his neighbor, and there was Richard Branson, his neighbor. And so I said, what does it feel like to be at the top of this? When you're really at the top of the game and you're dealing with all these people. And he said, John, you know what? One thing I've learned is the further up you go, the more you realize that nobody knows what they're doing.
Really?
And I thought, that's a really good insight. And so if nobody knows what they're doing, it's like the SAS motto, who dares win? Who dares wins, you know. Sure, the SAS are extremely skilled. Don't get me wrong, they're very, very capable. So you need massive amounts of skill and training and learning. You don't want to run blindly. You don't want to dive into a pool of sharks or decide you want to, I don't know, do crazy things. You need to know what you're doing. But courage and knowledge, and these are things that we're born with. And I think that a lot of our conditioning kind of stops us doing this. You know, many traditions of life make courage part of your development. You know, the warrior tradition. I mean, I was brought up in that, I suppose, and I think about it. My dad and my mum were very brave people, there's no question about it. But they never went on about it. It was part of what you would do. And I think we have to think of courage as something very normal now. And I think that if you're an artist, you will fail. And you might fail a lot, but you'll probably succeed. If you're an artist and a very good learner at the same time, you'll probably fail progressively less. And so if you're an artist who wants to learn how to succeed in business a bit better, you'll apply your mind to it. And who knows, you might be able to get more disciplines in some way to understand your rational. There's no division between the rational and creative mind. This left-right brain idea is effectively hugely debunked. You know, we have a sort of neuroplasticity. Our brains can compensate. I mean, there's some truth in it. But we need to have rationality and creativity as well, if you're going to live a reasonably functional life, I suppose. I think so. Some people choose not to, and maybe they're right and I'm wrong. I don't know. But you need to be able to learn. So if you're an artist who will learn, and you decide you want to learn a bit more about how to be successful, you'll read a few books about it, or you'll find a partner who will help you. You will understand that there is a lot of imagination in business. It's not something that will crush you. You'll understand that money is a resource, not something that's all about bankers and interests. It's just an energy. Richard Branson's, a lot of entrepreneurs' approach to money is that they don't work out how much they're going to earn. They work out, what can I afford to lose on this project? It's called the affordable loss principle. And so if I do this, it'll cost me this much. Will that destroy everything? No, I could risk this then, and they'll have a go. And if you're very good at learning by observing what's going on, noting, thinking hard, you will learn a lot more in that time than you will learn this much. As you've got this much time, you can learn that much. Other person will only learn that much because they're not working on learning. So if you're good at learning and experimenting, you will have quite a good way forward, probably. So these are the skills we don't learn in a traditional education quite often. We're taught to learn a syllabus or learn some facts. Life teaches us about the rest. And I really believe that education and business schools should be teaching you how to learn as well as teaching you things. And also a lot of what you learn is learned uncertainly and in practice, and you're never quite sure of the outcomes. But you get better at learning it. And that's one of the things we do at my business school. We teach people how to learn experientially well.
We're starting here with John. John, what are you doing tonight?
Tonight, I'll be talking briefly on climate change, Steve. That's the plan. I was going to talk on social media consciousness, but it turns out that if we don't have a planet, there won't be any Twitter.
My name is Leilani from PG DIP 2022, currently doing MBA 2023. I think it's the family-friendly environment, to be honest. Not having classes on weekends, definitely. And just being available for my daughter. I started learning who I am, what I stand for, and the journey is continuing.
And
I also read that you said that you don't that you aim to not just give the qualification, but that you want the students to understand how talented they are.
well, yeah, I mean,
Have I got it right?
Yeah, I think that's true. I mean, I think I wouldn't put it how talented they are, because if you say to somebody you are talented, you know, they think, oh, I'm gifted with talent. And we are all different, and some people are better at different things, and you can see that. But I think you develop talents. I think talents are things you can grow. And I think, you know, I am talented, or I've worked very hard through years and years of practice to be very good at this. And people will look at me and say how talented they are. They will ascribe that talent to some sort of mystical capability, rather than, you know, like a really good guitarist, like Stevie Vai, for example, who's a rock guitarist, who is now playing the work of Robert Fripp from King Crimson, who's another brilliant guitarist. These guys, they work at it. They work and they work and they work obsessively to get better. And there you are, and suddenly you're talented. And the work that you did to get there, and all the pain and struggle that and the courage and the determination is not shown. So it's a very simple truth, I think, in life, is that you have to work very hard to get good at things. And it's better if you work very hard at getting good at something you at least marginally enjoy, and something you hate probably.
Yeah.
You stick at it a bit better. And so that requires a bit of self-knowledge. And so I think we do want people to understand that they can develop talents and they can develop themselves. I live in South Africa, where we have the highest Gini coefficient in the world, which is the distribution between rich and poor. You know, less money in the most hands and most money in the fewest hands is in South Africa. Also the highest unemployment rate, and a history of apartheid, and a history of corruption and other issues that mean that people, a very poor education system as well, unfortunately, that people haven't getting education. Only of 100 school starters in South Africa, only 5 of those school starters end up with a degree after 5 years of leaving school. In Austria, I imagine it's 50-60%. In Finland, it's 55%. UK around 50%. So these are not stupid people per se. They just not had the advantages of education to help them frame their thinking, and so they don't perform well, or they haven't learned some of the skills that allow them to perform well in business or in life. So what we do often is we take people who have some education, or even more education, and we spend quite a lot of time giving them reasonably hard things to do, but showing them how to do them so they can succeed. We teach them system thinking, we teach them critical thinking, design thinking, and other things. We teach them about reflective learning. And all these things are sort of accelerators for learning, and help the brain, different brain capabilities get practiced. And after a while, some repetitions, they start seeing that they can do things and get outcomes they never knew how to. And sometimes they, oh, that's how you do it. I never knew. Really? And they practice, and they do it, like a good music teacher, I suppose. Good art teacher, I don't know. You can tell me. And then they suddenly discover, wow, I can do this. And it's like the brain lights up a bit. There's more going on, and they suddenly realize what's going on here, that I was never stupid. It's just that I never had... People confuse education with intelligence. Just because you're educated doesn't mean you're gifted in some way with intelligence. And just because you're not educated doesn't mean you're short of intelligence. It just means that you've never had the chance to develop it or to train it.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Yeah.
And then people learn that they are capable. And what happens if you are living in a world where all these qualified people around you doing jobs and you don't think you can get in them? You start to feel worse about yourself if you don't watch out. And you start to get an inferiority complex, or start having a negative self-image or belief. And that's why you get a lot of people saying, like creative people saying, oh, I couldn't do business. Or a lot of people who didn't go to education say, oh, I'm not academic, so I can't do maths. No, they just haven't been taught properly. Everyone can do maths.
Yeah.
So-
No, that's true. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you might say, no, I can't. Well, you can. Sorry, but you can. You could probably, you would say, everyone say, oh, I'm not an artist. And it probably makes you very annoyed because you say, yes, of course you're an artist. I can help you be an artist. I bet you, yeah, right? You can,
Yeah.
I'm sure you can help nearly everybody to do artistic work. Am I right? I don't know.
No,
Yeah.
that's true. And you know, I think it's that expectation. We think you have to be a concert pianist to be able to, play a musical instrument or something like that. And I have the opposite idea. I think we can all do something. And I think lockdown also showed us this, that, people reverted to different forms of art, like cooking, baking, and things like that. And they are all, for me, they are all art forms.
I think that's a very nice way of putting it. I mean, that idea makes sense to me. And that is art. And so why can't anything you do be artistic? You can be conceptually artistic. You can have beautiful ideas. You can have, I don't know. So, I mean, it's fascinating, isn't it?
Yeah. No, I think so. I think I think of it this way: if everything is taken away from you, you will experience this way of creating, because you will start building something or making something or creating something, because I think this is the way we operate. But I think because we have everything, we think we cannot do it. We think we are not artists, but I think inherently we are.
I lived in New Zealand for a while, and the big sort of thing people often say about New Zealand when they go, oh, it's so boring, oh, it's just sheep and all this, and and they're all very sort of neutral society. Everyone's the same level. They're all egalitarian. Oh yeah, and I laugh when I hear that, because it's true. When I lived there, I lived out in the country. There wasn't so much at that time grasping to be interesting or fascinating or whatever. There was a bit quieter. It was a bit more rural. And it was a bit like being in a sensory deprivation chamber, because you weren't continually bombarded with all this stimuli online or TV, whatever it was. You weren't, probably changed now, but at the time. But then I very quickly, after a while, I looked around and I realized that New Zealand is a home to some incredible creative endeavors. Not just the Lord of the Ring and the art stuff that goes on in Wellington, and the Maori history that you see in Te Papa Museum and all that sort of lovely art. It's a place where people find themselves in a way and can be incredibly, incredibly artistic. The quality of art around New Zealand is beautiful. It's film, there's music. And that's partly, I suppose, because exactly as you were saying, people find themselves beyond the noise. Is that when they are left there, the craft work there is extraordinary. It's lovely. And I think that we do find stuff in ourselves beyond this mad chatter of the monkey brain,
Yeah. Oh, no, definitely. But Jon, the one thing that I know is artists are dreamers, and dreams come true. So what are the dreams for you still?
I dream that my family will have a happy life, that my children will find themselves, my daughter will live a fulfilled life and be original and curious and sane and intriguing and imaginative and enjoy life and live life to its full. Same with my son, that he will be all those things, find himself and be original and authentic and brave, everyone, and find his own capabilities and get confidence in himself deep inside, And my wife will be happy. I dream those things, and then I dream also that we can really start thinking very carefully about what we're collectively doing. How do we find a way one way or another. It's going to be an awful difficult. When I go and look at the beach or swim in an ocean or look at some flowers, I've just been in a country now for a little while, and I could hardly see any insects, whereas I used to see so many butterflies. And I was thinking, I'd love to be able to see the butterflies there. I'd love people to understand what life we're living and how we need to. This world we live in is full of the history of it. It's a beautiful place, and why would we want to hurt it? And let's keep alive animals alive. Let's keep nature going and thriving, and maybe we will think more carefully about what it is we want to do with ourselves. And I don't think that's going to be easy at all, because we are, as a race, I suppose, incredibly fractured and very. But we are all beneath that very capable of working together, and sometimes that requires coercion, unfortunately, and sometimes it requires cooperation. And I think we have to find clever ways to think better about the world. So I don't know. I mean, what is quality of life at the end of the day? I think artists might say that the creative process is part of quality of life, that they're living a happy life because they're creating, even if they don't always have the money they want. And business people might say, who are really wealthy, might say, well, this is quality of life. I can do what I want. Very often they find that they want to give away a lot of the stuff that they have, because social acceptance and building a better world is built in all of us. I think I would have a dream where we think very carefully about the life we live on, and say that a decent life is one where we are trying to have people to thrive, but not become crazily wealthy, where we don't keep growing until we can't live on a planet anymore. And that we explore what we can. It's the level of when you look at the number of galaxies there are just out there, a number of planets and star systems in our galaxy, and you think what little we know, and the microscopic time we have, when you look about dinosaurs lived for millions of years and we've got 80 to 100, that, it all seems a bit silly, really. And why don't we spend some time trying to do stuff that somehow nourishes us, and give kids an opportunity to be with nature. And I don't know how we'll do as a human race, whether we'll drive ourselves to extinction and then something else comes up in another million years. But right now, it seems silly to be hurting each other on our planet. So maybe there's more pleasure in looking after people, but for some people it's not. Some people have different ambitions. So we've got to work very hard to bring more innovation and decency into life all the time, if we can do that. Yeah.
Well, I believe in the power of one, and I believe every one person who makes a difference, it's a difference. And so like you yourself at the Henley Business School, I think your outlook and the way you, or just your philosophy, I think it makes a difference to the students who are there.
Well, I'd hope so, because that's what we want to do. We want to make a difference, and to try and make ourselves feel very noble or great because we make a difference would be a very silly thing to do. I mean, if you're doing something and you want to make a difference and you're not succeeding in it, then you're not doing it particularly well. So I appreciate, obviously, a very kind sentiment, but we should make a difference. That's what educators should do. That's what we've decided to do. And you should have a sense of you're trying to do a halfway decent job. And hopefully that will be what we want to do. And we do want to make a difference. There's a lot of people here who could use better education. And we have a country that's got a lot of human capability. But more than that, we have a beautiful country that sits on edges of beautiful oceans that connect to other beautiful countries elsewhere. And we need to be part of a system that helps people think better about life, I suppose, and maybe teaches or helps people learn different things. And we're here because we want to learn.
So The launch of Henley Explore today was such a milestone for us. You know, it's been almost exactly 4 years since we started to experiment with virtual reality.
Professor Dani Petzer, who runs our research centre and has started creating a whole series of case studies, white papers, that we could create cases that in fact we've already lived through. The movie we made for Transnet, we had a look at their value chain from beginning to end. I think it was about an 11-minute movie, and the client could use it, our students could use it.
I think there's a lot of debates around generative AI at the moment, and I think instead of resisting it, I think we need to in many ways embrace it and equip students actually to use it in their work as knowledge workers.
You know, we're doing a job that we would like to be a decent job. We probably don't do it half as well, tenth as well as we could do, but we're trying. So we'll continue to try. Thank you. And you as the artists will be sharing what you do with people, no doubt, right?
Well, I'm trying, I'm just trying to raise awareness about all these different things. And the more I delve into what art is, the more I try to just highlight it, and this is why I'm so grateful that you took the time to speak to me, because this is really, this is, I think really a lot of things that you said to me in the interview has really now also opened my mind.
Well, good. We pass on what we learn from others, don't we?
Yes, definitely. Jon, but it was so great talking to you, really. And please let me know when you're in Vienna.
I will. Thank you very much. Yeah, and thank you very much for taking the time. It's very kind of you to do it. And good luck. I think what you're trying to do sounds absolutely marvelous.
Half in Africa, half the rest of the world in Europe. And we have an alumni network that want to wish you all well. They couldn't be here in person.
Who need eyes and weary brows, seek refuge in the night. They are the scatterlings of Africa, each uprooted one. Oh, mama, yeah. On the road to Pelamanga, where the world began. I love the scatterlings of Africa. Oh, you and I. Oh, mama, yeah. We're on the road to Pelamanga, beneath the copper sun. Sing it!
And a big hand for her. She's a PG Dip student who's gone on to do her MBA. Yay, well done.